Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are here to talk about SAP's certain new functionalities, mainly around identity authentication services and then identity provisioning services. Um, Before I start, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Pankaj Upadhyay. I'm a lead consultant here in Talent Team. I have been around here for 4 years now. Um, I do have various backgrounds, but one of the primary things that I do is I've been working with single sign-on and general authentication and security architectures for almost 10, 12 years now. And I've done various, maybe 30 or 40 projects of these. Um, so that's why what I'm trying to do in the session today is take you through some basic concepts of what is a single sign-on and how does it fit into SuccessFactors, and why as a customer, as a customer, you would want to adopt into something like this. Okay. I want to keep this session interactive. Please use your chat box or Q&A box to type in any questions that you have. Question can be related to what we're discussing, or it could be completely unrelated. As long as it links back to IAS and IPS, I'm happy to answer that in today's meeting. Okay, so let's start with this. So what I want to cover first is a simple agenda. Right, we'll go through some basics of single sign-on terminology, which is what SSO and SLO is all about, what technology is used in the background. Right now, you might have heard this term SAML again and again. This is the technology which is used in the background in order to facilitate this. And then we'll jump right into how these terminologies fit into the SAP landscape of IAS and IPS functionality. So let's start with a very simple question, right? What is single sign-on? Now, a lot of you may have different understandings on what it is. Now, single sign-on itself is not a technology, right? Single sign-on is an outcome of a technology. You can also call it as a functionality, right? It enables you to log into a particular system without having a need to enter your ID and password. And why single sign-on is so prominent in today's IT world is because the single sign-on enables you to log into, let's say, 50 systems at a time without even having to remember your ID and password, which is a lot of simplicity and a lot of end user experience gain and an organization will get out of this, right? And that's the reason single sign-on is becoming more and more prominent in every part of the IT infrastructure. A simple definition, right, as I said, is that you will be able to log into the system using without using your ID and password, and you will be able to do this across your services that your organization offers. Any questions on this? Okay. Then the second term, which is less known term that is used in context to single sign-on, is SLO, which stands for single logout, right? So this is another functionality which single sign-on terminology is used, where you will be able to log out of all your applications if you log out from one particular application. Okay, so something that a lot of companies use without even knowing that they are using it. So for example, if you log out from SuccessFactors, you are also logged out from, let's say, any web application that you are currently logged into, right? So that's something to keep in mind. It will be useful in the later part of the session. Next question that I have for you all is, what communications or what is needed for two systems to communicate in order to be able to log an employee in, right? And the answer is really simple, right? Which are just three things, and this is a very simplistic version of the landscape that or the data set that you need to use. The first thing is the two systems should trust each other. So there has to be some mechanism using which they know from whom a particular login call is expected. And the second is there should be some kind of a security check, right? That the call is coming from the right party, and we know who that party is. So there is a trust and security established before a login can happen using single sign-on. And the last thing, of course, is the user detail, right? Which user is trying to log in, with which account the system should log in you in the another system, right? So these are three high-level details that two system needs to communicate. And the reason why I'm explaining these few basic concepts, because it all ties up to SAML 2.0, right? Which is the technology or the protocol that enables what we do in SuccessFactors today. Now, one of the things that SAML does is it stands for Security Assertion Markup Language, very technical term, but what it allows you to do is it's a standard developed, I think, in way back in 2005, I think, if I'm not wrong. But this this protocol allows you to authenticate and fast login applications across the web and cloud services using a single identity management system. Now, you all might have seen already that you may be having an Office 365 account, but using the same account, you can pretty much access any application that your organization owns. That mechanism is facilitated in the backend by the SAML protocol, right? Now, what we use today in SuccessFactors is just maybe 10% of what SAML can do, right? Which is just understanding and authenticating people. But the major benefits of using SAML is, of course, you get a great user experience. That's one of the key goals that an organization look towards. You have your increased security, and then, of course, since everything is connected to one system, the cost of maintaining the system also is really low. Now, just for an example, how does a SAML work? And this is a very simplified version of that SAML, right? So basically, a user is, if you follow the steps on the screen that I'm showing here, a user is trying to access a particular service. Let's say the service is SuccessFactors in this case. Now, this service, SuccessFactors will say, you know what, I need to authenticate you. And then authentication, let's say, goes to Office 365, right? And then Office 365 checks, do we have this user details stored in the database or not, right? Once that is established, right, then a verification is sent out back to the Office 365 saying, yes, this user has a proper credentials. It matches with what details we have stored. Once that is verified, then another response is sent back to SuccessFactors, right, where SuccessFactors now accept, yes, this is a validated user. It's an authenticated user. So SuccessFactors will allow the user to log in, right? And that's when user will see its homepage popping up in front of him saying the login has happened, right? But everything that you see here, all the different communications of data and protocols that are happening, it is facilitated by this technology called SAML. And all of this happens in the background. So end user is not even aware of what is happening. They simply click a link and they log in. It's as simple as that for them. Any questions so far? Okay. I don't see anything in the chat or Q&A. So let's jump right into the main topic of the day with the understanding of SAML, of course. What is IPS and what we're trying to achieve with IPS, right? So IPS is nothing but it's an identity provisioning service. What does it mean? It means that using IPS as a platform, you can enable or you can provision users from one system to another system. What does that mean, right? It means that you can literally take data from one system, transfer it to another system with some modifications in between that needs to be carried out. You can assign roles, you can do group assignments and so on within identity provisioning services, right? So it's a system basically which can connect a cloud and an on-premise system for identity management. Okay, it also automates your lifecycle processes, and it also helps you to assign authorizations on the fly, right? You don't have to store anything, like you don't have to maintain RBPs. If you want to assign authorizations on the fly in certain systems, you can do that using identity provisioning services. In a SuccessFactor context, right, it is something that is used to take SuccessFactor employee data and put it on IAS, which is Identity Authentication Services. And the reason why that is even happening is because now IAS also has all the employees that are part of your SuccessFactor system, right? And then you can authenticate those employees for any application across the globe, right? So this is just a simple graphical view just to explain you what is happening in IPS, right? So basically you have a source system which holds your database or all the employee data. And in this case, let's assume that SuccessFactor. Now what IPS does, it uses simple SuccessFactor APIs to read the data, right? And that data is then transformed a little bit. In most cases, we don't do the transformations, but there are special needs where a customer might request for transformations. And then, of course, you can assign groups or permissions to people within identity authentication services. And with this transform data, it can write to any target system. And that target system in our case can be IAS. Now, the reason why you are doing it so that there is a copy of the data available to the target system where the target system now can do its own activities, right? So we'll talk about this in more detail in terms of what IAS has to offer. Now, the next topic is what is IAS, right? As I told you before, IAS is an identity management tool. Now, a lot of people that use IAS today, they don't realize the full potential of it, but today it is only used to facilitate single sign-ons with your Azure or any other mechanism or any other tool that you have available for identity management. But IAS itself can be its own identity management tool. A customer can very well work with just IAS without using any other authentication tool, right? So of course, IAS is a platform again, right, which allows for identity authentication, right? So one of the things that it does is single sign-on with a third-party vendor like Microsoft Azure. It can also create its own mechanism to log you into different applications. So for example, if I am using, let's say, SuccessFactor, then I have Microsoft 365, then I have Concur, then I have some third-party tool as well, which is not within the landscape of, you know, SAP or SuccessFactor. Employee can log into SuccessFactor and all the other authentications can be managed using just IAS, right? So again, for an end user, right, they go to SuccessFactor, they click on a link, they go to some other system and it simply logs them in, right? All that can be managed by identity authentication service as well, right? Of course, one of the great part about this tool is that it's quite easy to learn and it has inbuilt integration mechanisms and it's more of a self-service tool. Anybody who is an administrator here can go into it and manage it themselves with basic amount of training. So as I said, right, there are various features of IAS that people can use. Authentication is SSO is one that is widely used, right? There is another one called risk-based authentication, where if you want to enforce authentications based on IP ranges, user groups, or user types, you can do that. So for example, you can say a simple example would be people from certain IP addresses are allowed to log in, otherwise they are not. Second example could be, let's say if the people are of employment type employee, then we authenticate those users with your Azure AD. Otherwise, we don't authenticate them. They can simply use ID and password login, something like partial SSO that people use currently, right? But what if you have multiple applications, right? And a complex architecture could be a company could own 5 different Active Directories, right? And one SuccessFactors system. In that case, how would you handle the success single sign-on mechanism? And that's where setup like risk-based authentication can come into play. And based on the type or certain parameters of the user, the calls can be redirected to right Active Directories, and they can be connected to one SuccessFactors system, right? So really a great functionality. Personally, very few people use it today because most companies will have one Active Directory. Then also, of course, you have delegation authentication. So you can basically, based on certain conditions, you can delegate your authentication to a third party or an on-premise IDP if needed. And of course, towards the last, this whole system uses APIs and simple REST APIs, same APIs that SuccessFactors uses. So what it opens up to is that you can now manage your users and groups or invite users simply through any other system which is capable of sending or making calls to APIs, right? And in fact, the IPS system that we just saw is actually making use of these APIs in order to fetch or delete or add users into the IAS system using base data as SuccessFactors, right? On top of this, there are various other kind of features as well available. So you can customize your notifications, you can customize look and feel of the product, right? So for example, if you want people to log in with ID and password and they use IAS, in that case, you can theme the page as you like, right? It does require some knowledge of CSS, coding and basic HTML, but with little bit help from the IT, you will be able to make it look really nice. Any questions so far? Okay. This is a simple diagram view just to make you understand IAS a little bit more better. And this is assuming SuccessFactors is one of the primary applications that you are using, right? So for example, if you look at corporate employees path, if an employee is trying to log into SuccessFactors application, then his data will sync to your IDP using, or in this case, IAS using IPS. And then IPS can decide where the call should be redirected, right? Whether you want your call to be redirected to the, let's say, identity provider of India region or identity provider of Azure that might be used in another region of your company operates in, right? Now, IAS, as I told you, can itself be an identity management tool, but it can also act as a proxy. That means IAS doesn't store any data. A lot of customers that I have met, they assume that it is mandatory to sync SuccessFactors data to IAS, right? But in certain conditions, it is mandatory. But if you are simply using SSO functionality, then you don't need to use any kind of data syncs to IAS, right, via IPS. You can simply make your IAS as a proxy, right? In that case, you might as well not set up IPS at all, right? It totally depends on what your IT and security policies are. A few customers will prefer not to send their data to another system. In that case, we set up IAS to act as a proxy, where data is not stored anywhere. It's just, a SAML call is being redirected and authentications are happening, right? Another version of the same IAS architecture could be where IAS act as an identity provider. In that case, the data of the employee who is getting authenticated, or it could be an external vendor who is getting authenticated, has to be stored in IAS. You can create that data manually. You can create the data from SuccessFactors sync. You can create that data using some third-party systems via making an API call. Up to you how you want to do it. But once the data is in the IAS system, then authentication will happen directly within IAS, right? You will not have a need to use any of the identity provider systems like Azure AD, right? You can simply connect your employee directly to IAS, and IAS will do the authentication and will allow employee to log into the relevant application. Okay. Now, this is a small topic that I want to cover today is how to start with your IAS journey as a customer in case you want to adopt into it. And the steps are quite simple. These steps are also available on customer community. But what it is in a nutshell is that you are able to go to Upgrade Center. If you have the proper admin permissions, you will be able to go to Admin Center. And then within Admin Center, you will find an identity authentication upgrade job. And you need to run that job. That job will do two things for you, right? It will first, create an IAS instance, an IPS instance if you don't have one. If you already have one, then it will do the relevant setups automatically, right? And then, of course, you need to go and perform some tasks for in the IAS admin console. These tasks could be you trying to control who gets the access, where the calls to be redirected, or it could be, do you want IAS to be an identity data house, or you want IAS to act as a proxy, and also single sign-on setups, right? So those are needed to be done. Second thing is the authorization, right? So what's this job does, it creates a new account in your system called IPS admin account. It's like any other user data that you have. It's a special account which needs to be permissioned in order to for IPS to read the data from SuccessFactor. Technically, what you are doing is you are enabling this account to be an API user so that IPS admin can go ahead and read the data within the SuccessFactor system. One more thing to note is that IPS admin can only read groups in case you want to do any kind of group sync if you're implementing, for example, Work Zone, or if you have any special need, and for that reason you want to use group sync. In that case, IPS admin also needs to be given permission to role-based permission tool. Okay. Then, of course, you can go into your IPS system and perform your IPS tasks. A typical example that IPS task is, well, setting up a job in case any transformation changes are required to the data before transferring the data from SuccessFactor to IAS. In that case, you can handle those transformations. You do need to know some background on APIs, not very technical in nature, but as long as you are able to understand how to send a data from a variable to a destination variable, you will be able to do it quite simply. And if you read the SAP documentation, there are quite a few examples available for you to look at that and then create something of your own. Right? Once you're done with this, there is a second job available in the Upgrade Center, which is called activating the identity authentication services, which basically means what? When you run this job, any existing SSO setup that you have in your SuccessFactors system will get deactivated, and the IAS setup will become active for you, right? So the reason why this is important, some customers assume that because some SSO is to be done in provisioning, you can't activate yourself. You need help from some partner company or SAP. But if you run this second job, that activation can be done through the upgrade center itself. Okay. So I'll do a quick system demo about IAS and IPS, and just to cover the high level bits. Right now, if you see, I'm in the IPS system. Now, when you go to the home page of IPS system, it has three main things that you need to be aware of. One is source system, second is target system, and third is authorization. Authorization is granted to any person who needs to be an admin of IPS, right? Otherwise, it need not be given. So these are very named specific people in an organization. We do recommend 2 because that's a ballpark figure. So you have a backup always available in case the need arises. The second thing is the source system. Now, source system is a system from where you are reading the data, right? So in our context, a source system could be SuccessFactor. So if I go to my source systems here, you will be able to see what kind of setup I have today. So I have 2 source systems available to me. Of course, source system can be SuccessFactor, and it can also be something like a standalone Work Zone system in case you have one, right? Within SuccessFactor, as I told you, you define your system details, then a transformation it takes place. This transformation is quite simple. If you see here, you're basically reading the variable from SuccessFactor, and it's called last name, and you're putting it into a variable of IPS, which is called name.family name, right? You just need to do some reading to understand what those variables are, and you can simply send the data in there. And if you need to do any kind of transformation, right, you can follow the transformation examples, or you can create on your own. In this case, we are basically creating the display name of the employee by concatenating first name and last name, right? Then of course, you also need to set up a job. What this job will do, it will on a daily basis, it will check what are the changes happening within SuccessFactors system, and these changes will be reflected in the target system, which is IAS, right? So if you delete an employee in SuccessFactor, employee will get deleted in IAS as well. If you add a new employee will get added. If you change certain information about an employee, information update can also be done. Now let's talk about target system. Now, within the target system, of course, you have IAS. A target system can be SAP Cloud Analytics. It could be another Work Zone system, depending on what setup you choose. By default, you will have identity authentication as target system. Again, as I told you, you still have a way to modify data using the transformations in case you have, let's say, a dummy email address that you want to use for everybody, right? Especially in the test system that is applicable. In that case, you can simply hard code the dummy email address, and when you sync the data, everybody's email address becomes that email address, right? So you can do things like that. You can also basically set up password for people. You can decide whether people are allowed to use password or single sign-on, or they should be allowed to even reset their passwords or not. Things like that you can decide while you do this target setup, right? Any questions from anyone on IPS in general? Okay. Now, then let's talk about IAS. Now, IAS is as I told, it's an identity service, which means it can hold your user database as well. And the amount of information you store here is totally up to you. Few things are mandatory, like user ID, your employee number, your first name, last name, email ID, and so on, right? But other than that, some information can also be stored, which is application specific, and that is handled through these custom fields right down here. So for example, if you are implementing people analytics report stories tool, you'll probably end up using a custom attribute one, which holds a key, which is common between SAP Cloud Analytics and SuccessFactor or IAS. In case of Work Zone or in case of any other applications, you can add more and more of these and make use of that, right? So if you can see, you can store literally 10 different types of custom database, and they individually can enable you to connect to 10 different systems, right? Provided that the standard or the de facto IDs like user UUID or user IDs you cannot use in another system, right? Then of course you have ability to store user groups. These groups can be created. For example, in this case, this is one of the Work Zone implementations we did, where all the groups are created for Work Zone. What this group do is amazing, right? They grant you authorizations on the fly. So if you add somebody in the Work Zone admin group, then in the Work Zone system, that person will get authorization of Work Zone admin, right? Which means there is no maintenance that you do in the Work Zone system, but all the maintenance of authorizations is happening right here in IAS, right? Of course, you have your typical options, like you can make somebody administrator of the system. And within that, you have, like, for example, in this case, if I see mine, I have pretty much all the authorizations. You can pick and choose how you want to design those administrator roles. Then, of course, next thing that I want to talk about is applications. If you see here, SuccessFactors is one of those applications which connects to IAS via single sign-on. And the method that we use in this situation is SAML 2.0. You can also use other types of methods like OpenID Connect. Literally, you can use Google login if you want to authenticate a user through their Google login. That option is also available. But in SuccessFactors context, I have not seen any customer using it so far. And what you do here is a very simple setup of SAML, where you set up the different URLs for your target system. In this case, I'm trying to log into a particular system, and then I set up certain certificates in order to make sure my security is there between the two systems. Okay. I see something in the chat. Once user is available in IAS, will trigger any notification user with login and password. Leela, this is totally up to you, right? As I said, in the IAS transformations, you can define whether a notification should be triggered or not, right? In most cases, right, when we implement onboarding with IAS, we do allow notifications to trigger to anybody, especially for pre-day one login, right? If you want to give users access to the system before even they are employees, of course, they need to be triggered in email where they can set up their password and then log into the system, right? So you can choose what you want to do, right? Does that answer your question? Yeah. And one more thing just to add, those email notifications that you sent out can be customized, right? And you need to know basic HTML to do that, but they can be customized with any formatting, logos and everything, because a lot of customers are very sensitive towards what they're sending out, especially in context of recruitment and onboarding, right? So that's something that can be done. And since we are on that topic, you can create email templates right here. This is something called as self-registration. In some cases, in most cases, on behalf registration is done, because let's say an HR in the company created the account for you. And that's when this on behalf notifications will trigger, and you can basically visualize the notifications right here, how they will look and feel. And as I said, you can customize it as much as you want to it. You're just limited by the amount of HTML knowledge you have, basically. Of course, if you allow people to log in through password, you will be able to create your own password policies, right? As I said, you can also do IP restrictions, right? And you are able to do that in this system. Another few things that I want to talk about quickly is ability to connect to a corporate identity provider. So you can probably connect to Azure AD if you want to connect. If you want people to be allowed to log in via their Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Apple account, you can do that, right? Of course, these are used in a very specific scenarios, but if you prefer people to log into your system through, let's say for a sample sake, from using your LinkedIn ID, you can allow them to do that. System is capable of that, right? And then, of course, for all this, you have many reports and changes available to you. You can go and measure any kind of audit log. If there's a data change, if somebody deleted an account, if somebody added an account, if there was any failure, if you want to troubleshoot anything, any problems, you have all those logs available to you, which for a customer are really important, because at some point in an audit scenario, you will be asked to present those logs if the need arises. Okay, I'll jump back to my presentation. So that ends up the system demo part of this session today. But if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll try and pick as and when I can and answer those. Okay, now why IAS is important, right? Of course, we saw various functionalities of IAS, and most of them are not very, but it's kind of technical landscape, right? As a system owner, as a business owner, what is takeaway from you? What do you get out of it? Okay, so what I want to highlight is a few of the uses. Okay, so we have another question from Leela. So before I start the topic, I'll answer that. How external users in LMS can be managed in IAS? Well, same mechanism. You're actually doing a setup in the LMS system and a corresponding site setup in the IAS system. What that enables you to do, if there is an external learner who wants to log into your system, right? As long as this setup exists and you create that person as external learner, they will be sent an email out where they can set up their ID and password for IAS. Next time they log in, they will go via the authentication of IAS to go into LMS system, and they will go directly to LMS system, right? That's a high level explanation of it. Of course, at the ground level, you are configuring the SAML, you're configuring those URLs that I told you, you're creating your site as an application in IAS, and then there is some setup which is under the admin function of learning system, right, that you need to do. So talent team was part of co-developing this IAS-based SSO login for LMS. I think about 1.5 to 2 years back. We were one of the beta testers that helped people to develop this functionality. And then we are also one of the early adopters to it as well. And we have implemented it in a few places as of now. But it's not complicated in any means. It's a quite simple thing and straightforward things to do. I hope I answered your question. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Now, current use of IAS. The first one that we're talking about is, of course, authenticating external learners, right? And if you notice a trend here, right? If an authentication is needed from a third party, which is not SuccessFactor. It could be Azure AD, it could be an external learner, it could be your onboarding a candidate, right? It's going to IAS one by one, right? And that's a trend that we see. And the reason why we see that, because IAS is a standalone identity provider system, which means if I have, let's say, 10 more systems which I need my employees to log into, right? I can simply connect those 10 systems to IAS and then connect SuccessFactor to IAS, and there will be a seamless login across all the systems without needing you to procure different applications to do this mechanism, right? SuccessFactor is offering this very powerful feature of streamlining and owning and maintaining just one system to log into many more systems that you may own at one place. And this is now an out-of-the-box functionality in SuccessFactor, which is something really amazing. Okay, now the second use of IAS is report stories. I'm sure you guys know by now, report stories is new the tool for reporting solutions in SuccessFactor, which gives you ability to design more visually appealing reports across the system of SuccessFactor. Now, this reporting tool is nothing but the SAP Cloud Analytics tool trimmed down. That's how I put it. And in order for you to enable this, you need an IAS setup, which typically is done automatically. There is a job in Upgrade Center called Upgrade to Report Stories. That job will do the necessary IPS and IAS setup automatically. However, you still need to go to IPS and activate that setup if you want to use it and sync your data first time, right? But again, a very straightforward, simple activity. As long as you have IAS setup, you have access to report stories as well, which will help you in many ways with your reporting needs and dashboard needs. Then, of course, if you are using Onboarding 2.0 specifically, then if you want your onboardees to be logging into SuccessFactor system to provide certain details or to add more information, or in case you want to pass on information to them before even they have joined in the organization, that means they're not yet an employee, they're still an onboardee, you can enable this IAS setup to do pre-day one login for onboarding candidates. Similarly, now you know that Career Site Builder is available to develop internal career sites. And if you are developing an internal career site, then employee login to that internal career site can be done using IAS. And there's a small setup required for that as well. But once you do that, it works seamlessly, right? Then, of course, you can do your single sign-on and single logouts using your third-party providers like Microsoft or any other provider that you may be using. As long as they support SAML 2.0, right, it will work with SuccessFactor and it will work with IAS setup. And of course, if you are a customer who is planning or looking towards implementing Work Zone in future, then IAS is again one of the prerequisites of it, where it enables not just user login, but it also enables permissions and authorizations assigned to that user within the Work Zone. It all happens within the IAS. Any questions? Okay. If none, then that's all. Thank you so much for everyone participating in today's session. I hope it was informative and useful to you. If you have any questions, queries, or if you want to have further conversations, you can definitely reach out to us, or if you want to reach out to me directly as well, that's fine. And if you have any more questions, you can always come back to us. But thank you for joining today, and hope to see you in the upcoming more sessions that we are doing as part of this series. Vandana, yes, we will share the recording. It will be shared to all the participants via an email from my team. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye-bye.